And no, I don't see any evidence that this money is dealing with the structures of poverty. It's not creating economic growth. Like I said before, there's been zero economic growth in Africa.
In terms of having celebrities involved, Bono and Bob Geldof, of course, they did raise public awareness. Surely there's some good coming out of that, though.
I will grant that there's some good coming out of that there's more public awareness. Unfortunately, the way they channel that awareness is into really simplistic ideas like doubling foreign aid.
I know some of your ideas go head to head with some of your, your peers. One of them, of course, being someone who's made a big name for himself in the public eye, and that's Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. And here's something he said when I interviewed him about the issue of poverty and some action.
Mm-hmm. We're uniquely the first generation on the planet that could see to the end of extreme poverty if we choose to do so. It's amazing.
That's a bold statement, that we could see the end of poverty. I know you tend to think of that as very utopian, don't you?
Yes. He's kind of one-upping Bob Geldof on the white man's burden. He's not only saying we can save the rest of the world, but he's offering this kind of utopian vision of. In his book, he actually lists the trinity of prosperity for all, the end of poverty, prosperity, peace, democracy. That all of this, we will achieve and presumably obtain the lion lying down with the lamb and who knows what else.
Well, of course, your critics would say, well, what would you suggest then? At least he's being positive.
Well, it doesn't help to be positive if you promise things that can never be realized and for which no one will be held accountable for realizing. The kind of things I like to propose are concrete things that somebody could take responsibility for doing. Like getting malaria bed nets to people at risk of malaria, take responsibility for whether the bed nets actually arrive or not, whether they are used, whether they're successful in preventing malaria. That's the kind of specific thing that I would emphasize.
Do you feel that's not being done? Because I know you're against the top-down approach, aren't you?
Yeah, it's not being done because although there's plenty of programs to provide bed nets, it's done in a very top-down kind of way, as you said, by people who are really kind of almost like Soviet central planners in their mentality. That we decide how many bed nets Tanzania needs, and then we ship them off, and then you just magically expect them to work to prevent malaria. Actually, it takes a lot of bottom-up feedback to get the program to work, because you need to find a way to work with local people so that local people actually use the bed nets and actually be protected from mosquitoes at night, rather than having the nets diverted to the black market or just sit around in their package unopened, as has happened many times.
Professor, I'll ask you to address an email that we got from René Polman in the Netherlands. It was one of the emails we got when we said you were coming on. And René Polman says, to some extent you cannot guarantee or control the development because local authorities have so much to say in the actual situation. I'm presuming you agree with that.
I totally agree with that. I think in the end, aid could do a little bit of good by providing something like a mosquito net, but aid by outsiders cannot achieve development. Only homegrown development is the only kind that works. Only the people themselves can climb their own way out of poverty. That's the way poverty has always ended, and it's the way it will always end in the future.
How do you avoid duplication? I mean, if people are saying we desperately need these, we need bed nets, for example, we need these medicines, how can you avoid that voice going out to so many different agencies that there is duplication and, again, a lack of coordination? Surely there has to be some kind of person at the top or people at the top helping to coordinate.
Oh, well, there have been thousands of attempts to coordinate by people at the top, which have all proven completely ineffective, because basically for the same reason that Soviet central planning didn't succeed in coordinating all the consumer demands that had to be met by the Soviet economy. It's just impossible. It's impossible to control such an unwieldy bureaucratic apparatus. So you shouldn't rely so much on bureaucracy to solve the problems of poor people.
So give me a path that you would consider appropriate. Say, for example, there's a pool of money. For example, in the United States, there's a need for it in say, a part of Tanzania. Mm-hmm. How would you propose a line of getting what's there to those who need it?
Yeah, well, I think what we need to do in aid is really shift the mindset away from this kind of central planning bureaucracy mindset to think of the role of private entrepreneurs in market economies. They find ways to find new and creative things, new and creative ways to meet the needs of consumers.
Aren't they the ones who might sell the bed nets? That's the problem.
They could sell the bed nets. That would be fine. You know, that would work a lot better than the aid bureaucracy.
Sorry, I meant on the black market. I mean, aren't they the entrepreneurs?
Well, we can, you know, change their reward system so that they sell them to the people who are going to get malaria. And, you know, it doesn't mean that all efforts have to make a profit. There's such a thing as social entrepreneurs that find new and creative ways to meet the needs of poor people. You know, the great example of which recently is Muhammad Yunus winning the Nobel Peace Prize for his great microcredit schemes that make it possible for poor widows to lift themselves out of poverty with small loans from his Grameen Bank. Right. You know, these are the kind of entrepreneurs that we need in aid. We need a lot less bureaucrats, a lot more entrepreneurs, kind of searching for solutions that work, consulting from the bottom up to get feedback.
How many people do you find in your business or in your line of expertise, do you find agreeing with your point of view? Because obviously the publicity goes to those who say more money, big development. You know, the Jeffrey Sachs and the Bob Geldofs, they're the ones who are making the headlines.
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer neutrally, since
or in the sense that, I mean,
I'm biased.
Do you feel that you have a fair amount of support for your ideas, or are you battling?
Yeah,
are you battling upstream?
No, I feel like there's a lot of support in the economics profession that I talk to, and the whole development practitioners profession. That you know, the people that I interact with, there's a lot of support for these ideas. I find a lot of good give and take with development practitioners and other economists, and frankly, there's almost very little support for the kind of simplistic approach that Professor Sachs takes.
What do you expect to come out of the G8 summit next week then? What would you hope would be more in line with what you'd like to see?
I'd really like to see, you know, accountability get serious. Accountability is a word that people already use because, you know, bureaucracies are very ingenious in capturing whatever word you might use to criticize them, but people don't really understand what accountability means. It means, you know, individual responsibility to achieve a given task. And if you don't achieve it, there's some consequences for you. You know, you're rewarded if you do achieve. So if you get bed nets to successfully prevent malaria in a given area of Tanzania, you're rewarded. And if you don't, you're penalized. Now that's true accountability, and that's been completely missing in aid. That's one of the many reasons aid has not worked well.
So just a very quick thought, 20 seconds to go. Change at the World Bank, you were there 16 years as economist and research economist. Wolfowitz out, Zoellick in, what do you think will change?
Zoellick doesn't have much of a track record in development, so it's hard to say, but I hope they move away from this utopian vision that seems to be so popular these days.
Well, Professor William Inslee, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. On the next show, we speak with one of the most prominent anti-war